48 hours in Switzerland. And as we inch forward towards working on a U.S.-China trade deal, Nathan Dean is Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst. The news of the morning is that President Trump putting on Truth Social that 80% tariffs look right. What would an 80% tariff level look like between the U.S. and China? Is that a win?
What we would call it is an incremental win because it's getting us to a point of clarity. Now, obviously, an 80% tariff compared to a 154% tariff is much better, but it's certainly not at the level that you're going to begin to see any type of relief for the companies that we cover at Bloomberg Intelligence. You know, we often talk about, West Coast ports, slowing up and so forth. That trend will most likely continue with 80%. But I think the most important thing for the investors to think of when they come to their terminals on Monday morning is, do you see incremental wins to continue the negotiations? Is there a statement that says we're going to continue to negotiate, or is there a statement that just says we met and then, we'll discuss again sometime soon? So, obviously this is a continued negotiation. This is not going to get resolved in the next week, but we do want to see steps from the president and from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that conversation can continue.
What do folks on Capitol Hill think that might have some elections coming up in the next few years about what could be the economic fallout here from tariffs? Again, we had Gene Soroka, who runs the LA port, last week in our studio. He was saying you could see some empty shelves in the coming weeks here. That can't be good politically.
No, and I think some of the Republicans that are supporting the president's tariff agenda, or at least privately, not combating it, may be just sticking their head in the sand and say, let's just hope that it's not as bad as it is. I will say is that, the Republicans on Capitol Hill really are supporting Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's three pillars: tariffs, tax reform, and deregulation. Now, when it comes to tariffs, Congress really doesn't have much to play in there, so they're just going to say, look, it's the president's problem. We support him. Let's see. But they're really putting all of their eggs in this basket of tax extensions. And so that's why there's so much pressure coming from Speaker Johnson at the moment to get a deal done, because the last thing the Republicans want is to go home for the 4th of July and go to these barbecues and say that they haven't done anything to make sure that these tax extensions continue.
Well, yeah. Also, will they be there? Because isn't there some sort of debt ceiling thing? Is there something they have to vote on that week or something also? So there is that. What do you make of the news that Bloomberg reported that we could see higher taxes on those that make over $2.5 million, whereas a couple over $5 million? Now, the way that the administration is going to want to sell it is that it's okay because they can afford it. We're happy to pay it, and we want to use that money to pay for other things. But then you also have the headline of Republicans raising taxes.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to happen, because there's really two ways that you can deal with this tax extension debate. You can either raise taxes or you can cut what you're trying to do. And I think when it comes to the Republicans in particular, yes, President Trump says that, look, if you want to do it and you want to raise the $2.5 million for earners, I won't be opposed. But he also, in the same Truth Social post, said, well, read my lips, no new taxes type of thing. So I think what the Republicans on Capitol Hill are going to do is, rather than try and raise taxes, what they'll do is they'll scale down their ambitions. Now, there's been some reporting that instead of a $4.5 trillion tax hike, maybe they're going to go to a $4 trillion. There's already been some discussions about potentially, even saying, rather than making this permanent, we'll just do this for 4 to 6 years. And there's even been some discussions from the moderate Republicans saying, look, maybe we shouldn't even do this during reconciliation. Let's just wait till the end of the year, make a deal with the Democrats, just extend it and not cut anything. So, you're beginning to see little snippets of people saying, like, look, this is not as easy as everybody thought it was going to be. Well, I'm not sure anybody thought it was going to be easy. But now that they're facing the harsh realities, they're trying to find solutions, and those solutions aren't easy coming to them.
All right, Nathan, my strategy with all these tax discussions has been just to tune out. When do I have to tune in?
So I think that 4th of July deadline that that Secretary Bessent put in place is an important one. Next week, you're going to see a lot of headlines because we have two key markups. This is the House Ways and Means Committee and the House Energy and Commerce Committee. These are the committees that will say, here's our plan for all these tax cuts, and here's all of our plan for Medicaid cuts. And so, I just had a conversation with a client this morning is expect a lot of headline risk next week. But just remember, the House throws in the kitchen sink, and then the Senate ultimately scales it back. So Speaker Johnson wants the House done by Memorial Day. I think it's going to be more likely July. If the debt ceiling is included, then we think that this thing can pass before August recess. If the debt ceiling is stripped out, then look for this in October time-ish, before the end of the year.
All right, Nathan, really appreciate it. It's going to be a really fascinating 4 years. All right, Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst joining us. I was trying to be like, what time frame should we put there? And I just think it's going to be interesting all across the board.
Yep.